Call the Charter Review meeting to order. Commissioner Smith, you want to give us the prayer and pledge, please, sir?
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we come once again. Thank you for your many blessings. Thank you, God, for this opportunity to serve us of this city. We ask now for the guidance of Father as we partake in the last part of the Charter Review, that you will lead, guide, and direct our every thought. And all that we shall do will be pleasing and acceptable and be for the benefit of the citizens of Apopka. This we ask in our Son Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Made it with time to spare. Well, in theory, this should be a quick one today, but we may suffice to have extra time to let our idle minds wander on to other topics. But we're covering Articles 5 and 6. These are the last two articles of the Charter, and it is not that they are inconsequential. It is just that, at least as far as I can see, there's nothing that needs to be changed. That doesn't mean there won't be something that you or members of the public won't want to change, and so that's up to you guys to tell me, and then I'll make the changes accordingly. But you should have in front of you the memo regarding Articles 5 and 6, plus a version, of the updated version of the all proposed changes document that takes us all the way through 4. 5 and 6 obviously will be added after today. If we look at Article 5.1, which I believe should be right there. This was simply saying that the charter may be amended pursuant to home rule powers, which is what we're using here in the Municipal Home Rule Powers Act. And there's really nothing to change there. This is what we do. This is what we have done. There's already the power of initiative to amend the charter by the citizens if they choose. So there's nothing to add there. They have that power already. Any questions on 501? Okay, seeing none. 502 is the oath of officers. Which is essentially the oath you take when you are elected and sworn or resworn if you're reelected. And again, nothing there to change unless there's something that you want to discuss. Okay. Section 5.03 is budget adoption. The City Council shall adopt an annual budget. That's how it currently reads. It would be changed only to change the word council to commission if that's what you guys want to do. So there's nothing to discuss, but that would be consistent with the changes we've made to change the name of the body as a whole to be consistent with the fact that you are commissioners and that this will be called the City Commission. Number 5.04, the annual audit. We would have to do that with or without this provision, but there's no need to take it out. We have an annual audit. We will have one even if this is not here. There's no need to change it. On 505, which I actually got a call from the press today, is this new? And of course, the answer is no, it's not new. And we've had it in our charter. It is not in every charter, but it gives citizens rights to bring to us legislation by initiative if they have a petition circulated with enough signatures and all the things that go along with that. The only change here was, again, to change the word council to commission, which is what you see in the how it would read through all changes thereafter. Any questions about this? All right, and then Article 6 is a whole lot of housekeeping, but we'll go through it all just for the benefit of you all in case there's anything. 601 is a repeal of former charter provisions. Now, this comes from the last time there was done amendments on this, basically saying that we're repealing everything that existed before this past amendment. There's no need to take it out or change it. It's simply a historical provision based on what happened in the past. 602 is a similar thing, ordinance preserved, meaning that anything that was in full force and effect on the date of the charter, as long as it's not inconsistent with the charter, was still in effect. So again, historical, but no need to change. 603, let me see. Yeah, I got to get that. 603, city official continuation in office. All elected city officials shall retain their respective positions until expiration of their current terms of office. Again, consistent with Florida law, whether you change it or don't change it, this is the way it works. The 604 is pending matters. no rights, claims, actions, contracts, taxes, or legal administrative proceedings existing on the effective date of the charter and involving the city shall be affected, meaning if there was any pending claims, lawsuits, and so forth, they didn't go away when the charter was adopted. Historical, but no need to change or take it out. And then last, or not last, 605, let me go keep up with it here, provision for referendum form of ballots. This is consistent with state law. If it weren't here, it would still be the same. That is, you have the amendment, proposing the amendment, and then yes or no for rejection. This is how it was done for the specific election adopting this charter. It is historical in nature. It doesn't have any effect on anything that we're doing now, but it also is consistent with how we will do the ballot and as you will see the ordinance when it comes time for that. And then last is 606 and 607, the effective date, which is self-explanatory. That was October 1 of 1993, excuse me, and 607, which is very standard language, severability. If anything in the charter is otherwise illegal, it doesn't screw up the rest of the charter. So as you can see, all of the language in Articles 5 and 6, some of it historical in nature, none of it requiring change. If there was anything you wanted to add, any novel ideas you wanted to bring to the table, whether you bring them now or when we get to the parking lot, which is, I think, our next meeting, which is in April. Do you know the date? Is it the 8th, 5th? I can't remember. I remember we said it last time. I just can't remember what it is.
April what?
I thought it was on the 3rd after the meeting.
Yeah. I know it's in April, and I wrote it down, but I just can't remember it off the top of my head.
It
So-
was the 3rd?
So that's where that would be. In
Yeah,
terms
that's
of,
it.
before I speak further, is any questions on any of this stuff in 5 and 6? Okay, so the only thing that my notes reflect that are in the parking lot, meaning to be decided, had to do with how we conduct elections. And if you look at the all proposed changes document, I marked that as section 4.04, schedule and notice of elections. You'll recall that as it reads now, you have elections in December, which you haven't had for a long time. And there are issues we might want to take care of in that.
So you sent us that in an email?
No, I sent it to the city back on the end of February. And it was posted.
Did you send it to us?
No, it's supposed to be posted. I was understanding it was posted on the website. That's, or however y'all get them. I don't know how you get
But
agendas.
why would it be, I see it posted on the website, but why wasn't it sent to us individually? So I have to go on the website to look for it?
The answer is, I don't know, because I don't know how agendas are done. If that's what I'm supposed to do, I'm happy to do it. But what I've done up until now is I've sent them to the city administrator, and then it's magic after that. I don't know how it gets to you guys.
Well, to confirm too, you've sent it to us, some of these separately to us in previous times, but you're
Was
specifically
that
talking
on the
about your updates, the updates that we've gotten to kind of that master form.
So do you have?
We don't
it-
have that, and that's not posted, unfortunately.
This one that says all changes, you don't have this?
No.
No.
Okay.
The last
Both-
one we received was on February 11th. And quite honestly, we've had this email conversation ad nauseum. We've had this conversation many times. I don't understand what the disconnect is on us getting these
Yeah.
change documents.
So do you have it right now in your thing?
I'll make some
Yeah.
copies. Here, just,
I'm sorry.
why don't you hand that to me and I'll go make five copies.
Okay, so let me, we have discussed it, but let me
No, me
explain
neither.
my understanding, okay? So if this is on me, okay. But my understanding is if any of you ask me an email question and I respond to it, I copy everybody, which is what I've done from the moment that's been the case. But anytime I provide research to the city or vis-a-vis something that's going on the agenda, as far as I know, that's supposed to be handled in administration because I don't do the agenda. But if
No,
that's
you-
not what I'm
you-
supposed to do.
You are correct, but we shouldn't have to go on the website to look for it. It should be sent to each of us individually. And that's what I was looking for. I was looking for your response. And
Mr. Vavrick, have you sent us it?
is he here?
Exactly. So I think the disconnect is coming from, it's an administration level. I don't think
It's
I mean-
not you. You didn't realize we didn't get it.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
you would have had it.
I think that's the point.
Today I learned that it was on the website.
But still, we don't have the all changes, and that should have been published for our residents to see as well.
And
That should have been-
interestingly enough, I mean, I can show you the email. It was requested of me on the 28th. I gave it to the administrator via email on the 29th.
I hear you. Yeah.
So I assumed y'all had it in plenty of
No,
time.
and- Yeah, because I kind of did ask, I said, have we heard from Cliff?
Well, yeah, and
No.
that's because I sent you an email on whatever day it was
Right.
saying, where's it at? And
Yeah.
yeah,
So
the
do
all
you-
changes just were never uploaded.
Okay, so we're getting it now. He's going to make the copies, so.
So at any rate, anyway, I can just tell you, the section we will be talking about there in the upcoming parking lot meeting, if you will, is section 4.0 something, 4.
You didn't get it.
Well, wait a minute, he's got the copy. But it has to do with elections and when they're scheduled and everything associated with that. So for the next meeting, and we can add to it whatever else you want to put in the parking lot, including things we haven't discussed at all. But that's what I would need you to focus on is, where do you want to go with that? Because the last time we kind of discussed it, do we want to be in March? Do we want to be in November? Do we want to, right now we're in December, which nobody apparently wanted, and would require a special election time and so forth. But any other issues related to that is what we need to get so I can put it the way you want it on the actual ballot language.
Okay,
We'll wait for the all changes document
Sure.
to get to us and then be able to review it from there, I would assume.
I might be able to, if y'all have the ability to get emails up there?
yes.
Well, I'll see how fast I can email it to you, because I can pull it up on my phone without too much difficulty. Luckily, I remember the date it was sent, so it's easy to find it.
And the frustration you're dealing with right now from us, we've been having a lot of email issues recently on stuff that was never forwarded to us, even though it was addressed to us. So having that issue pretty consistently recently.
No problem. Okay. Okay, oral changes was sent February 29th, and I'm forwarding it right now to the Velasquez. There we go. Okay, Becker.
Thank you.
Okay. And this. Okay. A. Smith.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. No, okay, thank you. And B. Nelson. Okay. All right. I just hit the send button, so hopefully y'all will also have an email copy now. But at any rate, so back to the all changes document. Excuse me. The only thing that I have on my list that is in the parking lot officially from you all is 4.04, schedule a notice of election. And that, as I said, was about the December date, which currently exists in the charter versus what we want it to be. There was discussion about, do we want it to be March? Do we want it to be November? That's what the parking lot's for. Not only for y'all to make up your minds, but also to hear more from the public, and you can hear more from them today. We can talk about any of that stuff now, or I can take my seat and you can hear from the public now. That's your choice.
Well, why don't we hear from the public first, then we'll have you come back up. Okay.
Oh, here it is.
Who wants
Thank you,
to-
I did receive it.
Who wants to come up and speak?
Mr. McKeming, is this still the same, the one that you gave us on January 10th? I have this one that you had presented. Is that still the same? Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure.
Good evening, Albert McKimmey, 3603 Golden Gem Road. With a strong mayor to form a government, every other meeting we come into chambers and we find that we are in a situation where neither the public nor the commissioners have been made aware of information that they should have been. Whether or not it's at an administrative level, it's not satisfactory. I don't see that it's right that we have a system whereby our commissioners are being disenfranchised by the type of government that we have, that they don't get information. If they don't have the information, we can't ask questions if we don't get it. So we really need to address the fact that irrespective of what form of government we have, that there's something in the charter that allows the citizens much more access to speaking in public. Because as it stands just now, the mayor has rejected times for us to put things on the agenda, and there's nothing we can do about it. We get 3 or 4 minutes of public comment to make our point. Thank you.
You can almost see me. Just part of my face.
There's a button, Jack.
It's right in front of you,
It's on the
Right
side.
inside.
right in front of you.
Right here?
No,
No.
Cliff,
You can-
Cliff,
no, you
can you show them how to lower that?
See the buttons here, up and down. So you just hit it wherever you want it to be.
There you are.
Thank you.
Commission, Mr. Mayor, my name's Jack Douglas. I live at 2149 Eagles Rest Drive here in Apopka. I served 25 years as the finance director and city administrator here in Apopka, and I thank the city for all the opportunities they provided me during that 25 years. You have a copy of the letter that I sent in January.
I do.
And I wanted to only spend just a few minutes to kind of go over that and then maybe pull it all together at the end, if I could. There was 2 issues that came up that I was aware of, and one was employment contracts. In most cities, there's only one employment contract, and that's with your city administrator or your city manager. What happened was the city decided they're going to give contracts to all the department heads and including a couple of non-department heads. And that caused a lot of problems financially for the city. So I think the council needs to correct that problem, whether it's through the charter or asking the city attorney to look at it and incorporate it either in the purchasing policy or the personnel policies and procedures that would exclude any contract, any employment contract from being valid unless it came to the city council and was approved by the majority of the city council. The second thing is simply the relationship between the mayor and the council when it comes to the department heads. How do you deal with those? And how do you deal with the charter officers? And I think that needs to be cleared up, and it may be in the new languages that is produced here. If we go to a city manager form of government, that works its way out as part of the city manager form of government charter. But if we stay with a strong mayor form of government, we need to clarify that and get it straight so that in future councils, whether you're on it or not, they know exactly how it works. And it's personally, I believe that not only the charter officers, but department heads should be reviewed by the council as a whole and approved by the council as a whole and terminated as a whole by the majority of the council. Term limits. Mr. Mayor, you've worked on term limits pretty much your entire career, and so you know how it works. City council, this city council does not have term limits. And my recommendation is that you go to term limits. My suggestion is 3 terms, that's 12 years. And I think that's sufficient enough to get the job done that the citizens put before you to do. Now, I know that's an issue because some of y'all were elected, or all of y'all have been elected, without having term limits. So subjecting you to term limits that are retroactive back probably is not a good thing. So I recommend that if you do go with term limits, you say it starts the day that the public approve term limits. That means that if you already have two terms, you get 3 more. All right, if you're the mayor and you got 2 terms, you get 3 more. Yeah. And over the time, that will work itself out, and the city will be under term limits with just 3 terms, if you understand what I'm saying. In reference to districting, I believe that, I don't believe there's a need for districting right this minute, but I do think the council needs to look at the impact of districting, how they would proceed with developing the different districts, and when that implementation would take place. But I don't think it's needed right now, but I think you need to be aware that it's going to be needed pretty soon, the way the city is growing, to ensure there's equal representation throughout the city. The last one is city manager form of government. I'm all for city manager form of government, and the reason I am, I've worked under both. I've worked under John Land with a strong mayor form of government. I worked under the city of Orlando, where it had a strong mayor form of government. And I've worked for the cities of Largo, and Largo is a city manager form of government. My opinion is that a city manager form of government produces the best solutions to implementing the policies of the council. And the reason that is that that person is professionally trained, usually has multiple years of experience doing a city manager form of government, or at least an assistant city manager. And so they have exposure to all the disciplines that the city offers: police, fire, water, sewer, garbage, planning, zoning, just a multitude of different complex issues, all in one area. Whereas if it's done in a mayor's form of government, whoever runs for mayor is really being voted in as a popularity vote. They really don't have any experience with running a city. Now, they may learn based on the number of years that they're mayor, but that transition could be very difficult for that mayor, and it could be very difficult for all the staff when they're trying to continue on providing the services to the citizens. All right, that's the summary of, I got 5 seconds.
No, your 5 seconds was a long time ago.
All right.
It's good, no, it's good.
Just to bring it all together is that, it's the citizens that decide how the charter should be. And it's your responsibility. And think back to when you were running for office for the first time. You were saying to yourself, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to make a difference so that the public feels like they're part of the city. And there is no way you can do that as the charter would go unless you bring it back to the citizens to vote. So you need to be very aware that you may not agree. You may not like, for example, the form of government. You might want to stay with the strong mayor form of government. But if you vote not to do that, you're taking away that vote from the public. And the public should have the right to vote. That's on all the issues, whether it's term limits, city manager form of government, no matter what you come up with, make sure the citizens get their opportunity. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else?
As low as it goes.
I'm shorter than Jack. You already have copies of my opinion. I sent it to you a couple of weeks ago or a month ago. My suggestion is a lot along the lines of Jack's and Mr. Cloran's. We go back to the days of teaching ag together and using titles. I believe that we should have a manager form where you have a trained professional who knows all the fields and has had experience in it. They know all the departments and they know the ins and outs of running the city that they've been trained in and have worked in it professionally. That they don't just come in from running a political program and getting in, and maybe they were in floral design, or maybe they were an ag teacher, or maybe they were an insurance agent and in a small business, and suddenly they're, or a college student, and suddenly they're a mayor. This is somebody who knows and are experienced and educated in the different fields and know the laws. And they have personnel training. And because we don't know who's going to be elected mayor every term and what their experience is. We get them in here and they're trained. Then the commissioners and then the method of selecting a mayor can be various manners. It could be elected among the council. They can pick the mayor each year, or you can have someone that actually runs for the honorary title of mayor to go around and kiss babies and pass out keys to the city and run the meetings. And I also suggest that we do three-year terms and have a gap in between before they can run again, so that they have a hiatus. And that was all in writing to you. And I think that we can have, the other points that I made to you were in writing. And they were on my letter to the editor in the Voice of Apopka. We need to look through each of these chapters and see how they were laid out. We have a lot of, there's some really old stuff at the beginning of the charter that needs to be removed. And I believe I made mention of that in there, where it's just really old garbage that needs to be taken out. And of course, changing you to commission and commissioners, but mainly, and then also going to not December and then falsely doing it in March. We could save a lot of money by holding the election in November, and I have been putting that forward since I very first came to Apopka, and making sure that we save a great deal of money by having the election when the other elections go on. Thank you.
Who else?
Eric Mock, 2439 Birdie View Drive. I'm going to speak specifically in regards to the conversation about the date of the election. I agreed last meeting with Commissioner Becker when he brought up the thought process that if you wanted to work to have the greatest number of individuals in engagement during an election, then it would kind of make sense to do that in November. And I agreed with that then, and I still agree with that, because I think that that essentially tends to provide the opportunity for the most engagement. There are other times of the year, obviously, that you can hold elections, but if it were held in November, that's kind of what we have nationally used for elections, and I think that that would have the most engagement.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners, everyone in the rightful place. Nikki McGuire. I have nothing on the political side, first I want to say thank you guys for doing this workshop. Appreciate that we, the public, get to come and be part of it. You guys make me know that politics is not for me. So don't worry, your jobs are safe up there. I'm never going to be running for your office. My question is, after, it's great that we broke it up into the different charter review meetings. How much time are we going to get to be able to view the full package with all the changes before we have to vote on it at an election? Are we gonna have, how much time are we gonna have? Because it will be nice, breaking it down like this is good to make the individual decisions, but it would be nice to see the complete package to know what we vote in on.
Yeah. Yep. Anybody else, public comment?
Rogers back at 7 West Main Street. I just wanted to make sure I'm on record. I guess, I don't know if this ever come back to us or not, but from what I've heard tonight, I do believe November election timeframe would be best for the city as far as from election point of view. And I guess on this next item, I'm kind of biased because my background as far as schooling was pretty much in urban planning and actually becoming a city manager. So the city manager form of government, I feel, would be best suited for our city moving forward. There's going to be a litany of things that come our way with the growth that we're going to be possibly having in the future. So I think someone in that position that can look at different areas, sectors, seeing trends that take place, it'll behoove us, I believe, to move to that particular type of form of government. And then third of all, the term limits, I think that is definitely something that should be implemented. It was great that we had Mayor Lamb for all those years, but that has its pluses and minuses. And I think at this point in time, with what we're going to possibly have in the future, having term limits may be appropriate, whether it's 8 years, 12 years. I think I've heard 9 years, but I think at some point that should be instituted as far as, should it be, and I guess I'm really saying as far as consecutive. I'm not saying that you should not be able to run again, but at least give a term limit, maybe 3 years off, 4 years off, and then having another opportunity at it. But I just want to make sure I'm on record for that. Thank you.
Anybody else?
John Cloran, 593 Usler Road. You're talking about moving the elections from where it is now. The reason it's there is because we had a national election that we had people outside until 10 o'clock at night trying to vote. When it comes time to count the votes, federal, state, and local came in last. Local wasn't decided until the next day. So the state came along with your election people and changed it and said, hey, you know what, take the locals out, put them somewhere else. So that's what the local governments did. The local election commissioners changed when we met, but the state of Florida helped it along the way. Okay, with the going to a manager's position, and you're all talking about that, my question in the charter, and the people need to know, and Mr. Douglas was here as a manager when I came in. Okay, the question is, how much do you pay? How much are we going to get when you go in your charter? Is it going to be like when they do the presidents at the college? We have no idea who it is that the governor has picked until, oh, you know what? This guy here is from Nebraska. He's over UF now. Because they don't open it up to the public. If you're going to put it in there, then in the charter, it should say the top 5 individuals must come before the city council and the public to be interviewed, not in a little room all by themselves. Thank you.
Okay. Is that everybody? Okay. Cliff?
All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is answer the question, which was about the timing of when the referendum initiative will come back to the voters to take a look at the final picture. So what that looks like is between now and June, when we must submit to the supervisor of elections our proposed ballot initiative based on our ordinance, which has yet to be adopted, it will be finalized. So by June, we'll have a finalized document of some kind, submitting a level of questions to the voters. We haven't decided on what those are going to be yet, but you all know what's on the table. Once that's done, depending on when you direct the election to occur, and I assume it would be in November, there will be at least from June until November, if it is indeed November, for any citizen to read what we have, educate themselves, ask questions, even form a committee to be for or against certain amendments, which happens. Maybe by recent press, you know that Maitland, one of the cities I represent, has a library referendum on the ballot, and some group, and yet unknown, has filed a PAC called Maitland's Folly, opposing the referendum for the new library. And so there's plenty of time to do all of that and let the citizens know what's on the ballot. So that's the answer to that question. In terms of the other things, I wrote down the comments of Mr. Douglas that seemed to be echoed by others. And as to term limits and how they're adopted, if you choose to put those on the ballot, we can have that discussion. One of the things that I heard suggested, for example, is 3 terms and a space in between before someone could run again. That's okay. Again, I have no preference in that issue. Wouldn't, because it's all a matter of what you want. It's not about what's legal. But I would tell you the one thing that is legal versus not legal is it has to, as Mr. Douglas suggested, be prospective, not looking in the rearview mirror. Whenever you got elected, there were no term limits. So if term limits are being imposed, it has to be on a go-forward basis. It can't, well, you've already served for 2, so you're out. That's not how that works. So the reason why that is constitutionally, the state and the federal courts have determined that you have, as weird as this may sound, a property right in the elected offices you actually hold. So they're entitled to constitutional due process to get you in, to get you out, and so forth. So if there wasn't one when you got in order to impose one, it can affect what you've already done. So that's the answer to that question. Again, I can make arguments for or against council manager, strong mayor, because there are arguments on both sides, but I'm not advocating for any of those. So I'm here to answer questions that you want to cover that. And in terms of employment contracts, other factors that have been said, well, if we don't change the form of government, but we just change how people are hired or not hired, that's also an option. It would sort of be a hybrid if you tried to keep a strong mayor, but change that aspect. But could you do it? There's nothing that says you can't do it. So that's on the table if you want it to be on the table. But with that, I'm open for the suggestions. And if there are none, then I want to talk a little bit about what the parking lot might look like when we come to it on the 3rd. Any questions?
So can I just kind of go over? So what I'm getting from the public is they are interested, in other words, to have a choice, to be able to say, to allow them to choose whether they want to continue with strong mayor or have the choice of having a city
Manager.
City manager form of government. That seems to be what I'm getting. Also, term limits is kind of the consensus for most that did come up. And the other thing was changing the March election into November. But now, we talked about how in December, we had some elections. So what happens if you have a runoff in November? Then we're back to a December election.
Well, it's not exactly that. What we're changing is the charter, which says all of our elections are in December. That's what the charter requires, but we haven't been doing that.
Yeah.
And so no matter what's going on, unless we're going to have December elections, that should be changed. Although the voters have the ultimate say, right now we are inconsistent with the charter in how we're having elections, because the charter says 100% December. So assuming that the voters support some other date than December, the question is when. And there are options. There is the March option, there is the November option, and depending on how you want to do it, you could have special elections at a date of your choosing, as long as you're willing to pay for those as well. So those are all things that are up to you. And as to what you want to put before them, it sounds like to me the decision will be, do you want to keep trying to do March, or when a lot of local governments do their elections in March, or do you want to move to November, which, as people have noted, that's where a lot of traditional elections are held, and you might have a bigger turnout. Again, it's not a thing for me to prefer or advocate for. I just need to know what to write.
Okay. Okay.
Now, again, I guess if it's okay, Mayor, I'll talk about the upcoming meeting. This is the parking lot. And right now, as I mentioned, the only issue we have in it, but it covers a lot of ground because it would cover potentially term limits. It would cover when the elections are going to be held. It would cover if there's going to be term limits put on the ballot, what are we going to suggest they be? Is it going to be some suggested three-year terms with some gap in between a term limited candidate and the next time that person can run? And if so, how long is the gap? Some places that have term limits say it's 1 year. Some people say it's one term. Some say it's one election cycle. And there's a difference between a year and an election cycle because of qualifying. So a year is not the same, a calendar year, as an election cycle, because if you miss qualifying, you're already past the year in terms of when you can come back around. So those things are things that we will discuss, and you will direct me as to what you want to see in that. But other than that, issues that have been brought out but not advocated for as to you to tell me, hey, I'd like to see this or that, include, as Mr. Douglas said, districting. I think his words were essentially check into it. Okay, if that's going to happen, it's a much bigger deal than just putting it into the charter, because here's what that looks like if you have any appetite for it. You first need to study how the districts will be broken down. And in a city the size of Apopka, there would be a need to look at, for example, a racial element to make sure that there's adequate representation constitutionally. And how does that draw the lines within the city? I don't know. But typically you hire an expert to help you do and draw those lines. I don't know if Mr. Nelson, Mayor Nelson did that when he was in the legislature, or in the county, but it's a big deal. It's not something that's done overnight. And if that's the direction you give, for example, at the next meeting, the next thing would be to hire somebody to help start drawing those districts and what they would look like. The pros and cons of districts, if you all run at large, is that what it is now?
Yes.
If you all run at large, then everybody votes for everybody, and voters like to vote. However, if you say, well, we're going to go to districts, you go from having 5 votes to 1 vote for your commissioner, unless the mayor's position stays at large, whether it's strong mayor or not strong mayor, which is also something done. So even in council manager form of government, sometimes the mayor position, even though it's a weak mayor, is at large, and then the district position is limited to the district. So you go from having a maximum of 5 votes, everybody gets to vote for everybody and against whoever they want to vote for, to I get to vote for the person in my district only and whoever sits in the mayor's chair.
Oh.
And that's important because it means people may say, wait a minute, I didn't know I was going to lose a voting right here.
Can I play that one out? Because it's my understanding there's other municipalities that they have districts, but in the sense that only one candidate or only one elected official can be from that one district, but yet it's still it's a citywide election.
You could do that. Excuse me. But the problem is, if you do it that way, what you run the risk of is other districts keeping you from having the representation that you want in your district for other reasons, political or otherwise. So in a pure district system, the idea is you're actually getting the representative in your district that you want, not that 3 districts away voted for because they were teamed up with some candidate that district liked. So again, can you do it? Yes. Does it have negatives? It does. So districting was one. The other one, there were 2 areas of employment. One was department heads, and the suggestion was council approval. That's a part of whether you are council manager or whether you are strong mayor. But as I've suggested, if you wanted to do a hybrid, there's a possibility, again, assuming the citizens supported it. The other one was employment contracts. Well, employment contracts, I assume that Mr. Douglas and others meant contracts of any kind, because I'm not on an employment contract, but I'm a contractor for the city. So
No, what he's talking about is before they left, they got a 20-week severance
Yeah.
package is what he was talking
all
about.
right, if that's the case, then how the city attorney is hired, regardless of in-house or as a contractor or whatever you want to call it, it's whatever you want it to be. A hybrid would be where you still tried to keep a strong mayor who had direct authority over employees in terms of directing them what to do on a daily basis, meeting with the city administrator, setting out a path of action for the city. But nevertheless, when it came to hiring and firing of either the contracted employees or the department heads, it would still require a majority of council approval going in or going out. That's a hybrid. And yes, you can do that. And if the voters support it, then that would be what you have.
So on that point, you could have conflicting amendments, that would be a perfect example where, let's say you want to vote for a strong mayor or manager, or you want to have that on the ballot. But if you had that on the ballot, you still wanted to have the ability for the commission to remove somebody from office, whereas under a city manager form of government, that wouldn't be their role.
That's correct.
So how do you, can you work out?
There is a potential for conflicting questions depending on what you put before
Right.
them. So let's suppose that the council manager form of government goes on the ballot as a possible option. Shall we? Whatever. If you leave it the way that is traditionally, then the manager hires and fires everybody but him or herself.
Right.
Literally everybody.
Right.
And the exceptions to that, typically, there are sometimes one, sometimes two. If it's one, it's usually the city clerk. If it's two, it's the city clerk and the city attorney, whether it's a contractor or an in-house position.
Right.
And so that would be the traditional council manager role. Basically, the council controls two or three people, attorney, clerk, manager, and nobody else, and can't direct anybody else. In the strong mayor form, it's the opposite of that. Someone mentioned, well, the mayor comes in, they may or may not know anything, but that's why you have an administrator. Even though they can't make final decisions, the administrator is there to help the strong mayor make decisions about this is why we need to do it this way. But are there possible problems with both systems? There are, but in that one, there's a potential problem because again, in the strong mayor, even if the administrator is giving good direction, the mayor does not have to follow it. And so this is an issue that can come up. I haven't seen it, but it can happen. And so I think the next issue is what happens if they vote to keep the strong mayor, but vote for these limitations? Well, would that be consistent? It could be. You could have a strong mayor and still say that council votes on all the contracts, council votes on all the department heads. You could do that, and those would work together okay. When you change that, if they vote for council manager form of government, but against those two things, and which would be, in my judgment, an inconsistent result, then I would wonder, do they even understand how council manager works? Because if the manager can't fire and hire, what's it doing? And so there's the potential for an inconsistent result. But, the best you can do on that is voter education, and that's about as much as you can do because unless you don't put those things on the ballot at the same time, then you're going to have that potential.
Commissioner Becker?
Yeah, I guess just where do we go from here? Because to that end, it's the reason why it's the first article. It's the form of government. And so a lot of things will trickle down and have consequences based off of that decision. But that's, in my opinion, the most important decision to make.
Well, I guess it would depend, at least in part, on how you view what's the most important thing. Is the most important thing the council having authority to hire and fire contracted employees and department heads? Because you can put those on the ballot and still leave a strong mayor.
So this is where I sort of disagree with some of the folks that say, not just ratifying, but the ability to terminate as a collective council every single member of the senior staff. I don't agree with that.
Okay.
Because that's counter to what a typical org structure would look like. I mean, that would be akin to a corporation having managers report at the pleasure of the actual board itself, which is just not typical. Hence
Instead of the
why I said
president
in
or
the
something,
very
right.
first presentation, this creates the cleanest dynamic between an elected seated council and the person responsible for the day-to-day operations of our staff being the city manager, because that one person does have that authority to do the hiring, the firing, because their job is dependent upon the pleasure of this board, this elected board. Because if they're not doing that job properly, if they're hiring the wrong people, and they're not getting rid of the people that aren't doing the job properly, that everybody sees, the only recourse is then this council can say, okay, thank you, city manager, your employment is no longer needed, and we get the next city manager to come into that place.
Yes.
That's why I think that's the cleanest. You know, I've worked in plenty of corporate structures, and that seems to be the most suited for the reasons why I stated on the very first workshop that we had.
And theoretically, if that were to happen, the reason that works for the places that have council manager form of government is because the manager then has a very hard decision to make. Either I fire the employee who has lost favor with the council, the majority of council, or I get fired. And so it's a substantial incentive to the manager to bend his or her will to the majority of council, but it's not absolute. And I'll tell you an example where it was not absolute. In Mount Dora, where I was for 10 years, and our firm is back there now, we had a manager who I won't name, was a great manager in terms of his integrity, and you'll understand why in a minute. The winds of politics blew. A new council got elected. They have 7 members instead of 5. And so 4 of them basically said to the manager, who had literally only been there for 3 or 4 months, the planning director has to go or you've got to go. The planning director did a review, said there's no reason for the guy to go, and no, I'm not going to fire him. And then I said, okay, well, you're out of here. Now, I witnessed it. I know the facts, and so I understand that that was a political decision, which they were absolutely free to make. But the point is, the manager didn't bend to their will. But the planning director ultimately got the message and left anyway. And so both of them were gone because the manager said, no, I'm not going to do it. And that can happen, but it's unusual.
So I think with that type of government, like you just expressed, the city manager said, no, I'm not going to do it. He got fired. So now there's a void. The person that they wanted to fire eventually left, but now you're left with no leadership in between.
And then they had
And
to stop, right.
That's where my concern is, then who becomes the leader in that? Who becomes the one to kind of fill that void until you can get a city manager? And that's my concern with city manager.
Much like we have here, we had an unexpected vacancy in the administrator position, and we found someone to fill the gap. In the past, when I say what I'm about to say, I am not 100% not advocating for this, but to tell you examples that have happened. In the county, in Lake County, when that happened, they elevated for a period of time the county attorney, who was an employee, to also essentially be the manager till they could find a manager. So similarly here, you could elevate, not me, but you could elevate someone else in the system who use judgment you trust, who then would consult with attorneys, me or someone else, to try to make sure that they were doing the right thing along the way until you found like we are doing right now with Mr. Vavrick.
Right. What we're doing with Vavrick is we've actually elevated someone that was a part-timer to fill a position. I feel that our form of government with the strong mayor is like we have 2 leaders. We have Vavrick, who's the interim chief administrator, but according to our city charter, he's one of the charter officers.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't know how his title as an interim, it's not in the charter, it's an interim. So it's kind of difficult to determine, I mean, that's all we have is our interim city charter chief administrator. So I just don't understand that, where does the power come, or where does the absolute, who is in charge?
But in that situation, I mean, again, we're jumping right into all of what could happen in that scenario.
Right.
I kind of look at it from the opposite perspective. What's the optimal design or the organization of our form of government. And then ideally, if you have a city manager in place, that has succession planning written all over it. And if we would have a strategic plan, part of strategic plans are management plans, and more specifically succession planning. And that would be clearly spelled out to say, hey, I'm a city manager. If that city manager should either be terminated, incapacitated, what have you, here's the succession plan. The finance director is the next in line for an interim basis until another city manager can be installed, or by committee or what have you. But that would have to be worked out. But I guess
Okay.
I don't want to double click from the conversation of what should be, what's the most efficient and effective form of government that we should be exploring. And I kind of want to get to that decision point, because I think that's really the direction that you're going for is, if we're not ready to get to that point here, then we're wasting your time trying to.
Well, we shouldn't be, only because of lack of public notice at this meeting, but the parking lot is a different matter.
But clear direction to you.
Correct. So I can bring something to you to look at.
Correct.
And here's the thing. You asked the right question, but I'm going to explain it to you the way I think it should be properly explained. You said, well, what is Mr. Vavrick? He's interim. Well, he's interim because y'all stuck that title on him. But in fact, he has the job of city administrator. He's only interim because he's ready to leave as soon as y'all find his replacement. But that's why he's interim. If you said, we would like you to be permanent, he'd probably say no. But the point is, that's your call. So whether you imbue the administrator role temporarily on him and call him interim, or just call him the administrator, he's got all the authority under the charter until you take it away from him or he quits. So whoever has that role, if it was a succession plan, to Mr. Becker's point, of the the head of finance, or if it was a succession plan that said the public works director, or whatever, the police chief. I've seen fire chiefs used. It's really about leadership and who you trust to keep the ship on course until you find the permanent solution. And sometimes the permanent solution is already here. We just don't know exactly who that person is at this minute. And so while you could have a succession plan that says it will absolutely be this department head, it may turn out that that department head, in retrospect, is not somebody you'd like to have on there. So you'd rather have freedom to pick, okay, I think this would be a good choice based on we've seen their performance at the podium, when they presented items, we've heard them speak, we understand where their strengths and weaknesses are. That's who we need to have. And that's sort of what you have now. But again, either way is fine, but you don't necessarily have to change the charter to do that if you adopt an internal succession plan so that you all know what you're doing, because you have that authority as it sits right now.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with that. I think because if I look tomorrow, if you know, Chuck says, I'm gone, I'm done, you know, a succession planning, Blanche is great finance director, but she's only been here a year.
Right.
She wouldn't be the one, if I were just looking, you know, from my perspective, she wouldn't be my pick.
And that's what I'm trying to
It's not
say.
that she's not qualified, but she doesn't know, she hasn't been here long enough to know the departments and all the, you know, their inner workings, but.
I hope that was, my comments were taken as hypothetical. I didn't mean.
No. And that's how I'm saying that right now, you can pick collectively who you think does have this authority, as opposed to, well, our succession plan says it will be this person. And I think there's a strength in that, because at the time that may come up again, you will have seen the people who speak at this podium. You see them every meeting. Right. You will have seen their strengths, their weaknesses. Are they good speakers? How do they present? Blah, blah, blah. And then you can say, you know what? They may not be completely ready for the job, but here's the most ready person we have, and we need to fill that gap. And that gives you freedom. Whereas if you have a succession plan, it may not necessarily be, as it turns out, exactly the way you thought it would be. So I think that what you currently can do is a good method, but it's up to you.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I think we get so resigned to the fact that documents are done and then they're put on a shelf and never change. I mean, again, in my own work, strategic plans are looked at on a quarterly basis, and there's changes that are needed. They're made to be changed, because exactly to that point, if we have a well-experienced finance director that's been here for 10, 15 years, that knows the city inside and out, and that person leaves, but yet they were identified that position, the finance director, as our succession plan to step in on an interim basis. Well, if that person leaves in the next quarter, when you're reviewing that strategic plan, you realize, hey, we've got some exposure there. Actually, it should be this thing because they're the most tenured person. So that ebbs and flows over the course of time, things that aren't necessarily charter charter related.
Yeah, absolutely true.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll just kind of say my piece on the things that we've discussed so far, because there's probably 3 or 4 things. Obviously, the strong mayor form of government versus city manager, I think, is something that we should take forward to our voters. The term limits, I've said it in the past couple meetings, the 4-year, 3 terms seems like a very reasonable term limit to explore and put forth to our voters. The election day in November seems like the most logical. If for some reason we have to wait till the next day to find out the results of that election, if it means we have so many voter turnout, hey, I'm willing to wait 24 hours. Districting, that one's a tough one because, again, I did like that model of the other cities that I saw where it was district just in the sense of you have one person from a geographic and demographic area within the city, but yet still everybody can vote. I get what you're saying about people can kind of game the system, but if we're challenged with voter turnout as it is anyways, and yet then we create districts, and within those districts you have even more opportunity for compression in terms of vote turnout. I like the idea of having still the entire city, but yet you're kind of curbing this idea of having all commissioners from one specific area within our city. So I just wanted to kind of talk through the main points.
Commissioner Smith?
Well, I've kind of looked at both the strong mayor and the city manager form of government, and I'm still in favor of the strong mayor form of government. I think our biggest problem or concern is the language that we find in our charter, where it gives the sole power to the mayor to appoint or to terminate the city manager, the city attorney, and the city clerk. And I think just by clearing up that language would solve the issue that I think is at hand, is the driving force behind changing our form of government. I don't think that the council needs to be hiring and firing department heads. I think that responsibility needs to be left to those individuals that we place in those positions, that we have enough confidence in them to do the right thing. But I think those 3 positions, the city manager, the city attorney, and the city clerk, if we could clarify that language, I think would resolve the issues that we have. And then when we talk about the November elections and we have a greater turnout, the elections that we're having now also has a presidential candidate on the ballot. And so therefore, it's not costing us anything because we're piggybacking off of that election. So I don't see why changing, going all the way to November would make a great deal of difference. I'm in favor of leaving it at the March election. And then that way, if we have to have a runoff, then we can do that. And then we'll absorb that cost at that point. Districts, we're not ready for districts at this point because there's no easy method by which we can divide the city of Apopka into 4 equal districts and have the same representation for each one of those districts. And so I think we're headed in that direction. We're not there yet. I think over maybe the next 4 years, we may be there to go in that direction. And then should we do that at that time,
There's a cat here.
I think that we need to look at adding 2 additional council members to the council, and that those 2 be at large, and have 4 that would be for districts.
To that point, just real quick, Commissioner, could you have a population trigger in the ordinance so that you, let's say at 70,000, we would add 1 at large, and at 80,000, we would
Sure.
add
You could have a popular trigger that when the city reaches fill in the blank number, that the city council or the city commission, which I assume it will be a commission by then, is mandated to go to a districting system and to put together a system that is constitutional and fairly represents the voters of Apopka. You could put a trigger in that so that even if you don't do it now, when you reach 70, 80, whatever the number is you want, that could be an amendment as well. That's the kind of stuff that I don't put in because it's not legally required. But if you said this is something we like, I could put in, the voters could then
But
decide.
then it would make it it would be automatic, and we wouldn't have to come back.
No,
Put it on the
once,
ballot.
if you put it in as a trigger and the voters vote for it, when it gets to that magic number, y'all have to do it, or whoever's sitting here has to do it.
Well, it would have to be two because we need an odd number. We couldn't do
Right.
one.
Okay, then, okay.
Yeah, so it would have to be two. Because we have to have an odd number.
Yeah. Well, there may be some that have even numbers, but I'm sure that's rough.
Yes, yes, yes. And so that's why I suggested two. So that we have an odd number so we can maintain that. I believe it was it.
And can I just make a point on one of your topics? The March election, only 50% of those elections would be paid for by the county. Because the mayor's seat and seats 1 and 2 are off cycle from any, that's a standalone election. So that costs the city money. Going to November would cost the city $0.
I will say this, so you understand the possibility. The state law is set up to allow you, even if your normal elections are in November, to move them to the presidential preference primary because of the expected larger voter turnout, which is why people do it now. And so you don't have to do that, but it is set up as an option. And if we'd have to draw it into the charter so voters would know that in the year of a preference, instead of being able to get them voted in November, vote them in or out, you might have to wait until the following March. But you have that option. So you can have a November date, but still in presidential preference years, a March date, if you chose to do that. And the voters approve it.
And how would that affect the term of office of the person?
You'd have to
in
put it in the
office?
charter, so that way people would know that if that situation happens and it happens to be your year up, where you would ordinarily be up in November, you're not up until March. That's a part of what we'd have to draft.
Okay.
That's too complicated.
I get, I'm trying to lay the options out. I'm not advocating, I'm just telling you what's possible.
Susan, you know how much the last election cost the city? $6,000, does that sound?
No, it was more than that.
It's like 20 or
Yeah, it
30.
was like 20.
That's right, yeah. Because we
The
could
only-
have done the all mail-in for
Yeah,
a lot less.
the only
Yeah.
thing I would like to see for March elections, which did get passed, I think the council this time around, was it should be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I didn't realize when we, went ahead with it, that it was a 10 to 6. I overlooked that, but.
That's not us. That's,
I know, but there was a time when we actually voted to have it as 7 a.m. to, right, when it was a standalone, right, that we had it. And I would prefer that because I do feel the 10 to 6, even though it's the county that the elections did that, I feel that it leaves out a segment of voters because of the time frame. Because 10 to 6, the majority of the voters that live in the city of Apopka are leaving to go to work, and they get back after 6, so they miss that opportunity. Even though we have a Saturday and Sunday, I just feel that in the future, when we have this off year in March, that we should be cognizant of the time.
And so we only have the option if it's a standalone election to set the time?
Yeah, we have that option of having 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
That's what I said, if it's a standalone election. But we can't do that.
We could if we had, but we'd have to work with the supervisor of elections.
I'm sure we could do 7 to 7. We just have to pay that differential.
We just
have to
We have
pay
to pay the
difference.
2 extra hours.
Yeah. But because my understanding was the reason why they did that is because they was expecting a low voter turnout.
When you say who is expecting a low turnout,
The supervisor election.
but he doesn't determine that. I mean, I mean, he determines that only because he's basing it on previous elections from 10 to 6. But I feel that if we looked at the one where we did 7 to 7, I think we had a larger turnout.
Well, I don't have a problem with 7-7.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that wasn't our call.
but it could be our call.
Yeah, we wouldn't have paid for it.
Yeah.
Commissioner
It's
Nesta.
only money.
Yeah, I'll go quickly through this. For districting, I don't think it should be based on population. I think it should be based on the build out of our city. It's going to change as we go. So I think once our city's built out, then you add the districts, because as we continue to grow, we'll have to redistrict to make sure that it's equally distributed.
I don't think you can do that, though. I think districts have to be by population.
Well,
I'm
how
saying there
they're
shouldn't be
set
a
up,
trigger for it. I think we should be built out first and then implement districting.
if you're talking about trigger, I understand, but if you're talking about districts themselves not being by population, to the mayor's point, they have to be, because the idea is each district would have roughly the same number, both, they have to be
Right.
roughly proportional to one another.
Sure, and that's not what I was saying. It was
The trigger thing.
correct, exactly.
I got it.
In reference to November elections, I definitely have an appetite for that. That was proven to be a better turnout in Commissioner Velazquez's last election. She garnered the most votes of anybody in the history of the city of Apopka with over 10,000 votes. So clearly the November elections do bring out more voters. So that definitely worked. Pro manager form of government, it's clearly what our voters are asking for. And then I'm also for the term limits, or have an appetite for the term limits of 4 years and 3 terms. And I'm not sure I have an appetite to come back. I think you should be termed out. I don't think we need to have a 1 term, 2 years, whatever. I think you did it. Great job. Time
Okay.
for some succession plans.
Again, that's also fine. So the decision would be, you're termed out for a period of time, or you're termed out.
Right. And
I
that's,
just need to know which one.
the latter is the one that I prefer, but it's the appetite of the council and our residents.
I'm in agreement. In fact,
That I'm in agreement of.
my first campaign, I don't know if you ever ran into him, Judge Webster, Bob Webster, came up to me outside the VFW, and he argued that I shouldn't even run for two terms. He was a 1-term get out of office kind of a guy. So I think when you run your succession of service for that term period, I can buy into that.
Anything else?
Anything else?
Oh, so let me cover what I'm going to make a checklist for me and for you all. Here are the issues that I've written down that I need at the parking lot session to know what you want me to write. So that means we'll actually vote at that time who's on what side. District trigger, yay or nay? And then if it's a yay, what's the number? Council manager on the ballot or not on the ballot? Again, I assume it's going to be on, but I need a vote that tells me that. Term limits, again, don't know, but assume it would be enough votes to get on. So I've heard 4 years, 3 terms. I've heard no repeats, but there may be people who say, well, if you stay off for a year or you stay off a full term or what, y'all need to figure that out and then let me know at that time. One of the things that can be done to avoid the conflict situation where the voters vote to keep a strong mayor, but to not let the mayor have the same authority that he would have now regarding contract employees, is to say that if the council manager form of government is defeated, that means the strong mayor stays, then contract employees would be hired and fired, the city manager, city clerk, city attorney, by a majority vote of the council. That way, it would only work, that restriction would only be there if the council manager form of government fails. The reason that's important is because if it wins, you don't have to say it because it's already there. It belongs to this council, not the manager, but the manager covers everything else. Elections, again, need a decision, November, March, or some combination of November plus the presidential preference if you choose to do that. And those are the ones I have written down. Is there anything I left out?
The one thing that I had was, here we are, this charter review. The last time we did a charter review was over 10 years. Is there somewhere we can put in the charter that a charter review should be? I
Sure.
don't know, we'll have to determine the number, because it allows for our public to come in and say, there's some things that are working, some that are not working, but at least have something in the charter that allows.
That triggers a review.
Gives them some information that, after 5 years or after 8 years or after 10 years, a charter review, and it prepares the public to kind of come in and either agree with the charter that's existing or make some changes, because I feel as our city is growing, the charter should change with the growth of the city and some of the demands on how the public gets served by their elected officials.
I understand that. Let me walk you through that and what that looks like. So again, when I served for Mount Dora, one of the reasons I got good at charter reviews is because their charter required them every 2 years. And so I did a ton of charter reviews. And I've done many, 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 many more since then. That's probably, in my experience, too frequently. 5 to 7 years, probably somewhere in there is about right. And you have a very brief charter anyway. As you can see, like Articles 5 and 6, we could have said never mind, and we would have been in the same place, relatively speaking. The meat of the stuff is in the first 4, the stuff that really concerns most people. And then a lot of stuff that people get exercised about isn't in the charter at all. It's in the Code of Ordinances. And the good news is for either of those things, the Code of Ordinances or the charter, there's already, although I recognize that it's difficult to execute, a citizen right to provide charter amendments, a citizen right to provide and present ordinances to the council for consideration. And if the council says no, the thing can still be put on the ballot if enough citizens sign on to it, and if they vote for it, then it becomes the law, so long as it's not inconsistent with the Constitution or other legal principles. So there is already the ability of the citizens to influence, but to your point, it is not easy to exercise because it requires organization. You got to do the legwork and all that stuff. And it really usually will depend on just exactly how mad they are about whatever the issue is, whether they can mobilize to that level. But it's already a possibility. Additionally, with or without regard, let's suppose we put in a 7-year or a 5-year automatic review. It doesn't mean you couldn't decide as a body, as you did here, let's do it now. You could do that. And you can do it, and you can also do it on a single issue, a specific thing that's come up and you've seen, this is a problem, the hiring and firing issue. All we want to do is address that issue. You can put the one question without reviewing the whole charter to the voters to make a decision about changing the charter. So all of those things already exist. But is it a good idea to take a look, a certain periodic look, no matter what? Yes, I think so. Y'all just need to tell me how long, and then I'll write something up.
Okay.
So you don't have to decide that today. I'll put it down on the list.
Yeah. Parking
And
lot.
then y'all can talk about it and then tell me what you want to see, and then I'll put it together. We have, if I'm not mistaken, 2 parking lot sessions, right? 2 we only scheduled 1 left, but I think we left a date for 2, right? And so what I would propose is I get the feedback and y'all vote on these issues, get the public's participation. That gives me time between that one and the next one to say, okay, now here's what it looks like if it were to go on the ballot the way you propose. Once y'all decide that, the last thing for me to do is to put it in an ordinance format and bring it to you, first reading, second reading, and then send it over to the supervisor of election. So that's the order of operations.
Okay.
Sound good?
Good.
Any more questions?
And it has to be done by June, correct?
June something, it's like June 8th, June 10th, something like that. Susan, can you find out exactly the date? I know there's a deadline in June, I just don't know what it is.
Okay.
All right. With that, any other business? Okay. Thank you all for coming.